I spent 35 days in a hospital bed fighting for my life. 35 days of beeping monitors, intravenous lines, and the clinical hum of the intensive care unit. In all 840 hours, the number of family members who walked through those doors was exactly 0. My survival wasn't a tragedy to them, it was simply an administrative oversight. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. 5 months after they finally unhooked me from the machines and discharged me, the lingering smell of hospital antiseptic had just begun to fade from my skin. It was replaced by the familiar, grounding scent of graphite, ink, and cold coffee. I was sitting at my drafting table in my downtown studio, a space I funded entirely on my own, without a single cent of their help, meticulously detailing the vascular system of a human heart for a medical textbook. My breathing was steady. The apartment was quiet. Then, the silence shattered. My phone buzzed against the glass desk, a text from Patricia. I didn't even call her mom in my head anymore. The preview on the lock screen told me everything I needed to know. I unlocked it and read the demand. Alyssa, the deposit for Samantha's wedding venue is due by 5 o'clock. We need $24,000 transferred to my account immediately. Your sister's dream location will be lost if you don't step up. We expect your contribution today. After everything we've done for you, it's the least you can do. I stared at the glowing pixels. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't feel the familiar, suffocating panic that used to grip my chest whenever my family issued an ultimatum. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, or perhaps a shred of mourning for the mother I never really had. But there was only absolute clarity. A year ago, I would have desperately tried to explain that I had just survived the intensive care unit, that I was buried in medical debt, that I had nothing left to give. But today, anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical, a surgical severing of dead tissue. I realized then exactly what I was to them. I'd always been the silent investor in their version of a family. They took my energy, my money, and my sanity, offering absolutely 0 returns. Love wasn't a bond to them. It had been a subscription, with me footing the bill. My compassion had been a luxury they'd overdrafted for 28 years, and my near-death experience was just an annoying disruption to their cash flow. They weren't shocked by what they were asking of a recovering patient. They simply expected me to keep playing along. This wasn't revenge. It was accounting. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't type out a paragraph defending my humanity. I just opened my laptop, the screen illuminating the dark studio, and started clicking. I logged into my banking portal. I navigated to the saved transfer contacts and selected Patricia's name. In the amount field, where she demanded $24,000, my fingers hovered over the keyboard with lethal precision. I typed the number $1.00, a single solitary dollar bill to finance the golden child's perfect day. In the memo line, I didn't write an explanation. I typed 2 words, good luck. I clicked confirm. The transfer processed instantly. I didn't wait for the inevitable shockwave. I didn't wait for the notifications to start pouring in. Calm, factual, lethal. I switched my phone to silent, flipped it face down on the drafting table, and picked up my stylus. Inside my chest, there was no panic. Inside, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. They had issued their final invoice. Now it was my turn to collect. $1. It might seem like an unhinged, petty reaction to a $24,000 invoice. But to understand the precise valuation of that single dollar, you have to look at the balance sheet of my entire life. In the corner of my studio, tucked behind a drafting lamp, sits a stack of 5 silver-plated picture frames. I bought them 4 years ago. The glass is coated in a fine, undisturbed layer of dust. The cardboard inserts still display the stock photos of smiling, generic strangers. I purchased them for a mantle I didn't have yet, believing that eventually, my family would take a group photo that actually included me. Eventually, I thought, I would earn my place in the frame. That's the insidious nature of the trap of normalized cruelty. When you are born into a family as the designated scapegoat, the devaluation doesn't happen in one explosive moment. It is a slow, methodical conditioning. You are trained to view familial affection as a premium commodity you must constantly purchase, while the golden child receives it as a basic, undeniable human right. My sister, Samantha, was the golden child. Her existence was fully funded. My existence was a continuous audit. When Samantha needed an $800 weekend getaway to decompress from the profound stress of existing, Patricia and Christopher happily transferred the funds. When Samantha maxed out her credit cards on designer clothes, it was dismissed as a minor accounting error. But when I landed my first major contract as a freelance medical illustrator, a career I built from the ground up, sketching complex anatomical diagrams until my fingers cramped, my father called it a cute hobby that would never yield a real return on investment. I was expected to constantly subsidize their golden asset. For years, I bailed Samantha out. I covered her rent when she was between passion projects. I paid for her car repairs when she carelessly backed into a lamppost. I was the silent partner in the corporation of Samantha. I thought that by consistently depositing my money, my time, and my empathy into their accounts, they would eventually pay out dividends of love. But toxic families don't operate on a system of mutual exchange. They operate on extraction. The golden child is the prized asset, and the scapegoat is the limitless, exploitable resource. The normalization of this cruelty means you stop noticing the daily theft. You stop noticing that you are pouring your life savings into an empty void. You convince yourself that the emotional neglect is just the standard cost of doing business with your own blood. You buy silver picture frames and wait for a return that is never coming, because acknowledging the bankruptcy of your own family is too terrifying. You prefer the illusion of a debt over the cold reality of a scam. My hospital stay hadn't created this deficit. It had merely forced me to finally audit the ledger. I had spent 28 years trying to buy my way into those empty picture frames. Looking at them now, gathering dust in the shadows, I didn't feel a trace of sorrow. I just recognized that the asset was completely depreciated and the account was permanently closed. The contrast wasn't just in the silence, it was in the sensory whiplash of those 35 days. My reality was defined by the harsh, stinging bleach of ICU antiseptic. It burned the back of my throat, a constant, sterile reminder of my proximity to death. Their reality, meanwhile, was documented in high definition on Instagram, saturated with the imagined, sugary scent of vanilla buttercream and fondant. While my organs struggled to remember how to function, my family was busy crowdsourcing their dessert options. I remember the exact afternoon my lungs finally managed a ragged, unassisted breath. Stephanie, the ICU nurse who had effectively become my proxy sister, was carefully feeding me ice chips from a plastic cup. Her eyes held the kind of genuine, exhausted relief that you can't fake. In the corner of the room, my boyfriend Ryan was asleep in a vinyl hospital chair that offered zero ergonomic support. His neck was craned at an unnatural angle. He hadn't left the ward in 4 days. He had depleted his sick leave and was absorbing unpaid days just to ensure I didn't wake up alone. My survival was an isolated project, funded entirely by the emotional capital of 2 people who had no biological obligation to me. I managed to reach for my phone that afternoon, seeking a brief distraction from the persistent, deep-bone ache of recovery. I opened the app, and the algorithm delivered Samantha's post right to the top of my feed. A carousel of photos, tasting the magic. Which one should we choose for the big day? There was Samantha, laughing with a dollop of frosting on her nose. There was Patricia, holding a crystal flute of champagne, pointing admiringly at a towering 4-tier creation. There was Christopher, looking engaged and present, actively participating in a debate over raspberry filling versus lemon curd. They were at a luxury bakery in the North Shore district. It was a 20-minute drive from the hospital, where I was currently relearning how to swallow solid food. 20 minutes. 3 exits down the highway. The juxtaposition wasn't sad. Sadness implies a loss, a mourning for an asset that once held value. The contrast was simply a new data point. I analyzed the images not with jealousy, but with the cold detachment of an auditor tracking misallocated funds. The cost of that artisan cake was roughly equivalent to a day of my life support. My family was actively liquidating the equity they supposedly held in me, spending it on sugar and social climbing. Nurse Stephanie wiped my chin. Ryan stirred in his plastic chair, his face lined with dark circles, ready to stand the moment my monitor changed its rhythm. These 2 people were hemorrhaging their own comfort to keep me anchored to the living. Meanwhile, my genetic shareholders were sipping mimosas, completely unburdened by my absence. I didn't leave a comment. I didn't send a guilt-tripping text. I just locked my phone and handed it back to Stephanie. The emotional audit was complete. The ledger was balanced. They had invested nothing in my survival, which meant they were entitled to nothing in my recovery. The single dollar I transferred weeks later wasn't an insult. It was an accurate appraisal of their worth. It took exactly 14 minutes for the single dollar transfer to detonate. The fallout wasn't a surprise. It was highly predictable behavior from an over-leveraged entity realizing its primary credit line had just been severed. My phone, still face down on the glass drafting table, began to vibrate with a manic, buzzing intensity. 1 missed call, 5 missed calls, 12. I didn't reach for it. I didn't feel the familiar, suffocating panic that usually accompanied their displeasure. I just sat there, letting the vibrations rattle against the glass. When I finally flipped the screen over, I had 9 voicemails and a barrage of frantic texts. Patricia's voice in the first voicemail was shrill, oscillating wildly between maternal disappointment and outright hostility. She demanded to know if I thought this was a joke, if my medical trauma had caused cognitive damage, and if I understood how humiliating it would be when Samantha's luxury venue canceled her reservation. Christopher's voicemail was shorter and much colder. He stated that I was being profoundly ungrateful, that family covers family, and that he expected an apology alongside the full $24,000 by the close of business. Simultaneously, the digital smear campaign launched. A notification popped up. Patricia had posted a vague, passive-aggressive status on Facebook about how some people let a little hardship turn them selfish, and how true family shows up when it matters most. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I didn't draft a single defensive paragraph explaining my reality. Instead, I shifted entirely into professional mode. This was no longer a familial dispute. It was a hostile audit. I selected the first voicemail. I listened to 3 seconds of Patricia's screaming, then clicked delete. I moved to the next. Delete. Christopher's heavy sigh and reprimand. Delete. The Facebook notification. Delete. The repeated action was rhythmic, methodical, and entirely devoid of emotion. I was systematically clearing the emotional blackmail to make room for cold, hard data. I packed my laptop and every single medical bill into a leather tote and walked out the door. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from an accountant friend at a quiet, industrial coffee shop. I didn't ask for a shoulder to cry on. I asked for a blank spreadsheet. For my entire life, I had accepted my family's financial narrative at face value, trusting the ledgers they presented. Now, I realized my blind trust had been a severe, ongoing liability. We started with the intensive care unit bills. We meticulously cross-referenced my insurance payouts, the out-of-pocket expenses I had charged to my own high-interest credit cards, and the exact timeline of my 35 days on life support. We built an undeniable paper trail, analyzing my income against their supposed financial struggles. I didn't pause to search for any lingering trace of grief. My mind was already locked into the data. I was hunting for the missing variables in my family's financial equation. The time for emotional processing was over. Now, it was just cold, hard math. But as we dug deeper into the billing records, cross-checking the dates of my emergency surgeries with the external financial data, my friend's finger hovered over a specific line item. It was a massive, glaring anomaly that did not fit the established narrative. My parents hadn't just been overdrafting my compassion. They had been running a completely different kind of enterprise entirely. The anomaly wasn't a missing expense. It was a phantom deposit. My accountant friend, Mark, tapped his pen against the screen, highlighting a wire transfer history that didn't align with my own banking records. "Alyssa," he said quietly, his brow furrowed. "Where did this $18,000 come from?" I leaned closer, the harsh fluorescent light of the coffee shop reflecting off the spreadsheet. I didn't recognize the routing number. I didn't recognize the account, but I recognized the vendor on the receiving end. Petals and Peonies, the most exclusive floral designer in the North Shore district. I didn't panic. Panic is an emotional response, and I had entirely divested from emotion. Instead, my brain initiated a forensic trace. It took me exactly 12 minutes of searching public registries and social media tags to locate the origin point. It was a GoFundMe page. The title read, "Support Alyssa's Fight for Life," accompanied by a photograph of me in the ICU, unconscious and intubated. Ryan had taken that photo to urgently update my parents, but Patricia immediately weaponized it. She sent it to Sarah, a senior illustrator at my agency, playing the distraught mother to manipulate her into creating the campaign. But Sarah wasn't the legal beneficiary listed on the account. Patricia was. I pulled up the update history on the campaign. The digital footprint told a story of methodical, sickening fraud. According to the timestamped updates, Patricia had contacted Sarah 3 days into my hospitalization. She had played the role of the distraught, grieving mother to absolute perfection. She claimed I was facing massive insurance deductibles and needed immediate funds for specialized, out-of-network medications that the hospital wouldn't cover. She insisted that to expedite the funds and save my life, she needed to be legally listed as the primary beneficiary. Sarah, operating out of genuine compassion, had handed over the administrative keys to the vault. Once my parents had control of the $18,000 raised by my colleagues, friends, and clients, they didn't pay a single medical bill. The bank records Mark and I pulled proved it. The funds were instantly diverted, washed through their joint checking account, and wired directly to Samantha's luxury wedding florist. My coworkers had effectively financed my sister's imported white orchids. But the embezzlement required a cover story. If people thought I was destitute and recovering, they might ask questions. So, Patricia manufactured a lie. According to the mass emails she sent to our extended family emails, Mark helped me recover from an old shared family server. She had completely isolated me to prevent anyone from asking questions. I was, in Patricia's words, in a restricted ICU ward under strict quarantine, where doctors have banned all visitors, so please respect our privacy and do not contact the hospital. They had monetized my coma. They had weaponized my colleagues' empathy. And they had buried the theft under a carefully constructed public relations campaign to protect their social standing. I didn't even attempt to summon despair. My heart didn't break, it calcified. This was no longer a matter of parental neglect or toxic favoritism. This wasn't a family dispute over a $24,000 venue deposit. This was theft by deception. It was wire fraud. Mark, I said, my voice entirely stripped of inflection. Print it all. Every receipt, every timestamp, every lie. I didn't feel sadness. I felt the cold, lethal weight of undeniable evidence. The audit was complete. It was time to file the report. The crisp autumn air of late October had finally broken the oppressive summer heat. Outside my apartment window, the leaves were turning a brittle, unapologetic gold, snapping off branches and drifting to the pavement below. It felt fitting. A soft, seasonal shift that mirrored my own internal climate. The dead things were finally falling away. I didn't send a warning text. I didn't invite my parents over for a tearful, dramatic intervention. They had forfeited the right to my emotional labor the moment they turned my life support into a revenue stream. Mark and I had spent 3 hours organizing the evidence. We compiled the GoFundMe time-stamped payout logs, the floral invoices from petals and peonies, the corresponding wire transfers from my parents' joint checking account, and the sickening emails Patricia had sent to our extended family, falsely claiming I was under strict ICU quarantine to prevent them from visiting or asking questions. I merged it all into a single, undeniable 14-page PDF document. At 6 in the evening, on a Friday prime time for evening scrolling, I opened the Henderson Family Updates group chat. 42 members, aunts, uncles, cousins, and lifelong family friends. I attached the file. My message was brief and completely devoid of emotion. Since everyone has been so supportive of Samantha's upcoming wedding, I thought you would appreciate seeing exactly how it was funded. Attached are the receipts for the $18,000 stolen from my ICU survival fund. Best wishes to the bride. I hit send. The digital explosion was silent but absolute. Read receipts popped up like falling dominoes. Within 5 minutes, my phone began to light up with frantic calls. Aunt Carol, Uncle David, cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. I muted the device, poured myself a cup of tea, and waited. It took exactly 2 hours for the frantic pounding to start at my front door. When I opened it, Patricia was standing in the hallway. Her usually immaculate blowout was in disarray, and her mascara was smeared beneath her eyes. She wasn't the composed, condescending matriarch anymore. She was a panicked, cornered animal. Alyssa, please, you have to tell them it's a lie. You have to say your account was hacked. She was weeping, gasping for air in genuine panic. Aunt Carol forwarded it to Brandon's parents. They are threatening to pull their funding for the venue. They're canceling the wedding, Alyssa. You are ruining your sister's life over a misunderstanding. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, feeling absolutely nothing. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mom, I said smoothly. It was a wire transfer. I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached over to the console table by the door, picked up a manila envelope, and held it out to her. Patricia took it with trembling hands. "What is this?" she sobbed. "It's a copy of the police report I filed this morning for theft by deception," I stated, my voice as cold and clear as the autumn air. "Along with the official fraud claim currently being investigated by GoFundMe's trust and safety team. You didn't just steal from me. You committed a felony." She stared at the papers, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly as the reality of her actions finally crashed down upon her. I didn't wait for her to find her voice. I stepped back, looked her in the eyes one last time, and shut the door. The deadbolt clicking into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The fallout was swift, absolute, and spectacularly public. You cannot build a foundation on stolen survival funds and expect the walls to hold. Brandon's family, terrified of the impending scandal and public association with a felony, withdrew their financial backing and canceled the engagement within 24 hours. The luxury vineyard, the imported orchids, the artisan cake all canceled. Samantha's meticulously curated social standing in the North Shore district evaporated overnight, replaced by whispers and averted eyes. My parents didn't just lose their golden child's dream wedding, they gained a catastrophic financial nightmare. GoFundMe's trust and safety team immediately locked the campaign and initiated a clawback of the misappropriated funds. Alerted to the active fraud claim, their bank's automated risk system flagged the anomalous wire transfers and temporarily suspended their joint accounts, pending an internal review. The police report I filed was just the first domino. The slow, crushing weight of a formal criminal investigation was already looming on the horizon. They had traded their daughter's life for a party, and in the end, they lost both. The picture frames on their mantle might still hold smiling faces, but the reality behind the glass was entirely bankrupt. I didn't stick around to watch the ashes settle. I didn't need to. 3 months later, my life looks entirely different. I am sitting in my sunlit studio, my fingers tracing the delicate curve of an aortic valve for a new medical textbook illustration. The air in my apartment smells like roasted coffee and autumn rain, a world away from the stinging bleach of the ICU. Ryan is reading on the sofa, his presence a steady, unwavering anchor. Later tonight, Stephanie, the nurse who fed me ice chips when I couldn't speak, who seamlessly transitioned from my caregiver to my closest friend, is coming over for dinner. This is my chosen family, a family built on mutual sacrifice and respect, not extraction and debt. If you are listening to this, and you know the deep, hollow ache of being the family's scapegoat, I need you to hear me. I know how exhausting it is to constantly audit your own worth, pouring your empathy into a void, trying to buy your way into a family portrait that was never meant to hold you. You are conditioned to believe that their neglect is somehow your failure. It is not. You are not a limitless, exploitable resource for people who refuse to love you. Sometimes, the most profound act of self-preservation isn't forced forgiveness. It is a permanent eviction. Cutting ties with toxic blood isn't a failure of loyalty. It is the brave, terrifying, and absolutely necessary step of finally choosing yourself. You do not owe anyone your future just because you share their genetics. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to make the agonizing choice to walk away from toxic relatives to protect your own peace, I want you to share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that we aren't alone. Please like this video if you believe family is built on respect and actions, not just DNA, and hit subscribe for more stories of surviving and thriving. Your courage might be exactly what someone else needs to see today.